Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Menil Collection. My name is Mary Magsman. I'm the manager of public programs, and we're so happy to have you here as we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Menil Archives. It's a milestone that honors the remarkable work of preserving the museum's history while also looking ahead to the future. Before we begin, I ask you to please silence your cell phones. This is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel at a later time. We're joined this evening by three individuals whose contributions to the Menil and its archives span many decades and reflect a spirit of care, curiosity, and collaboration. First, Geraldine, or Geri, as we know her, Aramanda, the founding archivist of the Menil Archives. Geri's work with the Menil began long before the museum opened its doors. Her career began in 1968 at the University of St. Thomas Art Library, followed by positions at Rice University Art Library, Rice University for the Arts, and Rice Museum, and of course the Menil Foundation. As the museum grew, she took on the tremendous task of establishing the Menil Archives, organizing and cataloging the institutional and family archive in the form that took the foundation of the museum's history. Next, Don Quaintance, a native Houstonian who's been part of the Menil story since 1969, when he began as a gallery attendant at Rice Museum. As a designer, Don created the Menil Collection's original graphic identity in 1987. Over the years, he's designed many of the Menil publications, including Art and Activism, projects of John and Dominique de Menil. Don's research in the Menil Archives spans decades, and his thoughtful attention to visual and historical detail has enriched countless projects across the museum. His most recent book, Duchamp in California, Walter Hopps Curates a Retrospective, also drew from exploring the Menil's archive and is currently on sale at our bookstore. And finally, Margaret McKee, who joined the Menil in 2015 as an imaging services specialist just 1 year before Geri's retirement. Working next door to the archives, Margaret quickly came to appreciate the depth of Geri's knowledge and often collaborated with Don on publications. Today, Margaret is the Director of Research Resources. She oversees imaging services, the library, and of course, the archives. They're all dedicated to preserving and providing access to the Menil's invaluable information resources. Please join me in welcoming Geri Aramanda, Don Quaintance, and Margaret McKee.
Thank you, Mary, for that introduction. Thank you, Geri and Don, for joining me here tonight in celebration of 25 years of the Menil Archives. This is all really just an excuse to get you guys to hang out with me for an hour. So Geri, you're here tonight because you created the Menil's archives, but your connection to the collection and to the de Menils goes back further than 25 years. Could you tell us a little bit about what brought you to Houston and how you met Dominique de Menil?
Coming to Houston was purely accidental. I was married at the time. My husband wanted to move to California. He was offered a job to work with Richard Roeder, designing Foley department stores. So he said, Houston's halfway there, let's go, and we did. And I got here in 1963, actually. We moved to the neighborhood here in 1967, and I think I got pregnant the day we moved here. So it was and I discovered the University of St. Thomas at the same time, so it was about 6 months after my daughter was born that I started taking classes at the University of St. Thomas. And then I immediately got divorced and needed a job. So with the help of Bill Camfield, I managed to get a job at the art library and continue classes, and that's how it all began. And of course, Dominique was such a generous, open person. We connected immediately, I think based on our mutual interest in Thomas Merton, of all things, and we became close and stayed close until she died. I still miss her. And I started the archives 3 years after she died, but I always felt like I was doing it for her. She was one of the most important people in my life, and still is, because everything I learned from her stays with me all the time. She was great.
What were some of the first jobs that she hired you to do?
Well, I worked at the art library part-time and then full-time. And then I became an assistant to Harris Rosenstein at the Institute for the Arts, and then worked at the Rice Museum with Sandra Curtis. And then the Image of the Black project moved to the back of the Rice Museum, and I was quite bored sitting at a desk in front of the Rice Museum and saw that she was doing really interesting research, which is basically what I love to do, even as a so
On your way to the Rice campus.
It's the 60s. I think this is when I first met Geri also, when she was in the back of the Rice Museum and I was at the Media Center.
right. Well, I have a blow-up of that in my bedroom, actually.
She was a wild woman.
I guess I was in my own way. But then I started working on the Image of the Black project. It was, at that point, it was 1973, and I think I worked there till 93. I thought it was 10 years earlier, but I think I worked there for 20 years in the Black Image Project before I came. When the Image Project moved to Harvard, I decided I didn't want to leave Houston. And Paul Winkler and Dominique de Menil embraced my staying, put me in the Curatorial Department, and I started working there, mostly editing books and working with Bertrand Davisac, helping him compose catalogs and organize him, actually. If you know Bertrand, you know what I'm talking about. But
I remember watching Geri when she was working at the Image of the Black, and she was like this world-class typist. I mean, it was amazing how many letters she could put in a few seconds.
it was a joke, you know. She's such a good typist.
And we were using a computer program that AC Conrad introduced us to, which is called TEX, and it's not WYSIWYG, it's old school. It's almost like you're programming as you're typing. So you're putting in backslashes for italics or Roman, and it was really nutty. It was really complicated.
Yeah, I typed the entire Image of the Black. There were 4 volumes that we did here in Houston. I typed the entire book, all the footnotes, and had a hand kern footnotes. There were hundreds and hundreds of footnotes, and in French and English.
And you couldn't see what you were doing on the screen. You had to print it out in order to see what it was going to be. This is the early days of computers.
So to rewind a little bit, let's go back to the Rice Museum. And so one of the exhibitions that was on while you worked there was the machine show.
Right, that was the first, wasn't it the first one?
Yes.
It was the first exhibition at the Rice Museum.
Yeah, the Rice Museum was built for this show in 1969. The show was originally going to be at St. Thomas, and when the de Menils picked up all their operations and moved to the Institute of the Arts at Rice, the show had to go with them, and there was no place to put it, so they built a temporary building.
Did Howard Barnstone design it?
Yes, Howard Barnstone and Eugene Aubrey.
Right.
And this is also the point where Don enters the picture.
So, this was my very first job with anything related to Menil. I was an architecture student at Rice, and the Menils landed, and it was just like I just got sucked in completely. But the very first thing that I did was run this machine, we called the ribbon machine, but it has a real name. It's supposed to be like an Indian rope trick, and it spins at 100 miles an hour and flies around the room. There was a lot of interactive stuff in the machine show. There was a tingly that was called Roto Zaza, and you threw balls into it and it would shoot them back out. So it was, and they had Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion car. I mean, it was just no holds barred. Whatever the Menils wanted to do, they did.
And of course, we had to throw in this photo of you with Nikki de St. Phal. Looks like she was fun.
She was great. And later in her life, I got to talk to her. I can't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but either she called me, I think she called me about something, and she was a delight. I got to meet so many incredible people, like Isabella Rossellini and Nikki Tangley, Bob Gober, one of my favorites. He worked at the archives, and when he saw John de Menil's codicil to the will, he immediately went to the cemetery to see the graves, because I told him that Don and I, since the first year after her death, we've gone to the cemetery every year on New Year's Eve when she died to put flowers on the graves and visit her. She's buried with John and Jermaine McHagee. And Don still goes.
I still go, yeah.
I don't live here anymore, so I can't go. But he sends me a phone image every year, and so I'm still there in spirit.
In typical fashion, the de Menil grave markers are just in the ground. Flat, nothing, just with their names and dates. I wanted to say something about this picture and the earlier picture of the group that was at St. Thomas, and I think it's very indicative of the fact that this was like a big family. I mean, it was not, in those days, it was not like an institution. And
there was very little bureaucracy. It was all Dominique de Menil. She directed everything, and we followed, and when she asked us to do something, we did it. Even if we didn't know how to do it, we figured out how to do it. We were totally devoted to her. And John died in 1973 is the only reason that he doesn't come into the picture after that much, except anytime Dominique was talking to a group or any involvement, public involvement, she would acknowledge his influence on her and everything that followed. So, but, you know, we had a bowling team when we were at Rice. We had a dog. We adopted this pregnant dog, got homes for all the puppies, kept the dog, and when we moved here to the museum, when it was completed...
Blanca was the dog's name.
Blanca came with us. And when she was so old that she was arthritic and couldn't come up the stairs, she would come up the freight elevator, that elevator. And she lived to, I think she was something like 15 years old. There were 3 of us who fed her: Geri Parham, Bear, Julie Backey, and me. And we always took care of her. And we had to wait until Bear went out of town to have her euthanized because she was deaf, she was blind, she couldn't walk. But he kept saying, she's fine, she's fine. So we had to wait for him to go out of town before we took her to the vet Anyway.
So we've already touched on the image of the Black in Western art, but I'm not sure we gave sort of a description of the project. So for anyone who isn't familiar with this, in the 1960s, the de Menils launched a photographic archive and research project investigating the ways that people of African descent have been represented in Western art. And so it sounds like you gained some archival experience through working on this project. Would you say that?
Absolutely. I learned how to organize images and information. And when I came into the museum, I really wasn't that happy with the work I was doing at the museum because I really liked doing research, and I was just doing odd and end things, it seemed to me. So in 1995, I went to Paul Winkler, who was the director at the time, and said, why don't we have an archive? There's all this information from the past. I know it's at the house because they keep immaculate records. Elsie and Cousins, Mary Jane Victor, Mary Kadish, Kathy Davidson, Susan Nang. All these people were working all the time and saving there were boxes under stairways, there were boxes everywhere. Every bungalow, all through the museum, there was documents, the exhibition files that dated actually before the University of St. Thomas. Germaine McKegie's exhibitions from CAM were all kept at Rice. They were stored there because they didn't have a storage facility at the Contemporary Arts Museum. So Mary Kadish and I went through everything. AC Conrad helped us organize a FileMaker database, and we recorded everything we found, and there were hundreds and hundreds of boxes. So Paul had a 5-year plan that he wrote in 1990.
Paul Winkler.
Paul Winkler.
Did we say, yeah.
Had a 5-year plan that he organized in 1995, and the archives was in the plan. And in the year 2000, Phil Hagee, who was the librarian here at the time, came to me and offered to include the archive in his budget and start the department with me in charge. Because I didn't have the capacity to do that. I didn't have a budget. I practically didn't have a salary most of the time. So anyway, that's how it began in the year 2000. And the first things I cataloged were the Magritte Catalog Raisonné papers organized by David Sylvester and Sarah Whitfield. And I did that because I knew it was the most requested collection that the public asked for. Susan Davidson used to field the requests for the Magritte archives when they came in through the Curatorial Department, and she worked with David and Sarah on the Magritte Catalog Raisonné. So she organized a database, and every auction, we received all the Sotheby's and Christie's auction catalogs here. I don't know if they still do, but they did then. she would go through every single catalog and update every Magritte image, sculpture and paintings that came up for sale, and update the location. She would check who bought them. So I knew about this, and she generously gave me that database to keep in the archive to use for reference.
The Menil was publishing the Rene Magritte catalog raisonné at the time, is why she was doing that. And I just wanted to back up to the collection room.
Okay.
Because we have these slides.
Yes, we have some visuals to illustrate some of the things she's been.
This was a study in 3363 San Felipe, their home.
It's kind of John de Menil's space.
He was technically the first curator.
Yeah. So, and also, I wanted to just say that even though Geri is totally responsible for creating the entity of the archive, there was always this impulse on the part of the de Menils to save everything. So, and catalog it and categorize it. And that's what was happening in this collection room at the Menil house on San Felipe. And these are pictures there.
So all of these files, this is the documentation that Mary Kadish and I recorded. All of this documentation that was at the house and in the museum.
And Elsie Cousin, who was the de Menil's right hand, was keeping these binders of everything that happened in there. Is there a picture of them in the office?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That one.
This is Elsie and Dominique at the office, and I'm going to make sure and note that Dominique's desk was a card table. She insisted on a card table. I don't know why. And speaking of Dominique, Geri created this. Lance Armstrong was doing some armband, wristbands.
What happened was there was a big, what do they call a gala here, and a bunch of us had the idea that we would do a refugee ball for those who weren't invited, who couldn't afford to go or whatever. So my daughter does promotional printing, and I had these wristbands made. What would Dominique do? and the little what do you call those things? Buttons, whatever. And the erasers I had made, because I created this stamp, because every document has to be stamped in the archive. And this is a reproduction of the stamp. So I had them made to distribute to all the archive patrons. And it wasn't in my budget, so I just did it myself. But I don't even know if Kimball charged me for them.
And I wanted to say that even though the wristband was a joke, in a way, it was actually, once you were touched by these people, John and Dominique de Menil, I mean, you really did try to put yourself in their place when you were doing anything that had to do with the institution.
So you had experience working in the photo archive, and you've talked some about people who helped you along the way, but were there other resources you turned to figure out how to organize the archive, like workshops or?
Mary and I both went to, and then at some point I had an assistant, and the two of us went to Archives of American Art. The Society
of American
of
Archivists.
American Archivists. That's what SAA. We went to all their workshops, as many as we could take. We went to Portland, Oregon, and Dallas. I think there was one in St. Louis or someplace, I don't know. But we kept going to all these little convention things and take classes and try to learn as much as we could. But I think really the most important part of it were my instincts, because I said the first thing I cataloged was the Magritte, but in tandem, I also began cataloging the institutional history chronologically, which began at CAM with McHagee, and then the exhibition history, which worked in tandem with her files. So it was CAM, St. Thomas, Rice, and the Menil Collection, in that order. And in 2005, I think it was, Adelaide de Menil came to me and said, the family's been talking about organizing the family archives. Would you be interested in doing it? So, of course, I said yes. So I would take 3 boxes, go to the storage facility, get 3 boxes at a time. I had to get a security alarm because, you know, I didn't have anything like that at my home. But I was always afraid something would happen to those. That's why I only took 3 boxes at a time. In case anything happened, I didn't want them destroyed. So I did that for 5 years. And unfortunately, it's the only thing I never finished. I never completed doing. I always wanted to get. I still have in my mind what I needed to do, and I never got to finish it.
Maybe.
But everything, all the correspondence and all the documentation is on an independent database, so it's all recorded.
Maybe you could describe a little bit what processing a collection entails for people who don't know.
Well, first of all, you have to separate the photographs from paper, and then you have to get sleeves, the proper type of sleeves for the photographs and the paper, and everything has to be itemized on a database. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but if you want to find anything, it has to be. So that's kind of the sequence. And I literally didn't throw away anything. I remember when we were going through Jim Love's records at Paula Webb's, sorry. Lynn, what's her name?
Who?
They were doing a new catalog of Jim Love's work. Lynn Herbert was kind of trying to figure out what to call the exhibition. And I found a slip of paper that said, "From now on." The original Jim Love catalog was "Until Now." And I found this piece of paper that Jim had written that said, "From Jim Love, from now on." And I just went nuts. This is it.
Yeah,
this is it.
Because Jim had died during the organization of the show and before the show opened. And so...
But that's the kind of thing, you know, you just don't throw away anything. Just keep it.
I think her description of working on the family archives describes an obsession, obviously. I mean, she was working all day at the Menil, cataloging the Menil papers, and then she'd go home and start cataloging the family papers.
It wasn't unusual. Because when I was doing books, I remember in the elevator, a lot of things happened in the going up and down the elevator. It's only 2 stories, but it took a long time. Paul Winkler said to me, "Can you edit the Sheldon Nodelman book, the Rothko Chapel Paintings? It has to be, I think this was like something like March or April. It has to be done by August." I said, "No." And he asked me again. He asked me 3 times until I finally said, "Okay." So I lived across the street in a Menil house. I would come to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would start working. I would leave at 2 o'clock in the morning and go home for 4 hours to sleep because I was working with Sheldon in California. I was working with Harris here and an editor, Polly Cook, who was the best. And she would take Sheldon's manuscript and edit it. And then Harris would look at it and change things and then send it back to Sheldon, and he would reject Polly's edits, and I had to come in between and balance so that Sheldon would accept it and Polly would accept it and Harris would accept it. We finished the book in time.
Let's talk about some of the things that straddle the line between art and archives that are in the archives.
Well, the main thing, of course, is Dominique de Menil's correspondence files, which are technically artist files, and these are my favorites. These are little sketches that Alexander Calder sent to them, and there's boxes of Tingley and Nikki letters, not only in the archive, but in the collection room as well, so that there's no differentiation between what's where. It just happens that some are in the archives and some are in the collection.
Go back one. I'm not quite sure why Alexander Calder turned Dominique into Medusa, but they're actually it's a really good caricature of John.
Yeah.
With the glasses, and I mean, somehow captured him, even though it's completely free-spirited. Anyway.
But this is the Rosalind Constable collection, and it came circuitously, of course. Paul Winkler was acquainted with her, and Helen Winkler and Patricia Winkler edited a book. They had some...
They were living in Santa Fe, I think.
Yeah,
and Rosalind Constable was in Santa Fe.
They did something for her. I think it was some kind of publication that they worked on for her. And Paul became friendly with her, and he became an executor when she died. And she knew Dominique's work, and she knew about the museum, and she bequested this collection to the museum. So it's a fabulous collection of material. And it's used.
It's constantly. A jewel of the special collections at Menil because it goes from late 1940s to late 1960s. And this woman was, she worked at Time Life magazine as
the cultural correspondent.
Yeah.
An ombudsman or something. She wasn't an editor, but she would just go through things to try to come up with ideas for the art column in Time and Life magazine. And so everyone was sending her all of the announcements and ephemera and she was collecting them in these boxes. And similar to the Andy Warhol time capsules, in which he just threw everything that he had into a box by day, except she was doing it by category. Sometimes it would be one artist or a subject like pop art, right. And the boxes themselves are fabulous.
And when I cataloged them, I kept every box in the sequence that I received it, that she organized it so that it's exactly as it was when she had them.
So let's talk some about some of the ways that the archive's holdings have been used in exhibitions and publications. Geri, I was wondering if you could tell me about the genesis of the idea for Dear John and Dominique, the show in 2012 for the 25th anniversary of the museum.
I'm trying to remember if it was Michelle. I think it was Michelle White who came up with the idea, and she curated the exhibition. And I would give her documents to choose from. She asked me to select things, and she came and selected things. So that's how it all became organized.
I love
was
that
in
there are
the,
chairs.
in the East
Just-
Temporary Gallery. I'm sure some of you saw it, but there were actually little stools to sit and look at the materials. And then we have pictures from, I mean, the point being that the archive has actually kind of become a living thing in a lot of the exhibitions. And you can see, this is the Niki de Saint Phalle exhibition, and the Walter de Maria exhibition, and it just adds this this layer of.
And Robert Gober also used
Yeah.
the archives within the exhibition he organized here.
And of course, we've got the current exhibition, The Space Between Looking and Loving, Francesca Fuchs and the de Menil House, which everyone should see if they haven't already, because it closes soon. And also right now, the library currently has on display a case of archival materials related to the Rauschenberg show that's on view right now. So that's viewable by appointment. So making my pitch for those current displays. So there are also so many books whose research depended on source materials found in the Menil Archives. You both worked on art and activism, the Menil's book about the wide-ranging contributions of John and Dominique de Menil. So Geri, did you work on the chronology for that?
I think I worked on the exhibition history mostly.
I worked with Mary Kadish and a couple of other people on the chronology. And the thing about this book is art and activism we're talking about. It was the first time that Joseph Helfenstein was the director then, and he came up with the idea that there needed to be some kind of a record about the de Menils and the museum and their civil rights involvement, everything that they did. So it was a group effort on the part of the whole museum to put this together, and it's become a kind of Bible for the staff. It's all a result of the archives.
I worked a lot with William Middleton on Double Vision. He came constantly for a couple of years, and he finally managed. My main concern about the archive is access. I mean, if you're organizing all this material, you want people to use it. And the de Menil family was very protective about the family archive. But William finally convinced them to allow him access to the correspondence. So I would go to the storage. Well, actually, I had made photocopies of all the correspondence. And I had organized the photocopies in chronological order and by correspondent. So that's the thing I never got to do with the original documents, was to put them in that order. But I had the copies, I had the photocopies, and he finally got access to them, and it was very helpful for him to particularly document in the book the ancestors of the de Menils. and the Schlumbergers, because there are dozens and dozens of letters with their grandparents, their great-grandparents, all the family.
So to sort of close us out, I'll talk a little bit about the present and future of the archives. So our archives database is now publicly searchable, and if you scan the QR code on the screen, it will take you to the search interface. And I hope that everyone here tonight searches on a topic of interest to you to see if the Menil Archives has holdings related to it. You're always welcome to make a research appointment with our amazing archives team, archives manager Lisa Barkley and assistant archivist Krista Hollis. Yeah. And looking to the future, one of our priorities as we consider the future of the archives is ensuring that the Menil's current records that are created digitally are preserved as securely as our older paper records. And we want the work that the Menil is doing today to be available to researchers decades from now. You know, people think of digitizing something as preserving it, but digital files are really much more fragile than physical files. It's easy to delete a file, for something to get corrupted, misplaced, or for the format to become obsolete. I know Don's probably dealt with some obsolete Quark files.
Yeah, I'm not a Luddite, but I really like paper documents. And there's this fear that digital things have to be transferred from different applications and migrated to later things, later browsers. And anyway, I think I'm going to stay back in the mid-20th century.
Well, a big focus among archivists right now is digital preservation, making sure that digital records are safe and accessible over the long term. And this year, the Menil was accepted into Bloomberg Philanthropies Digital Accelerator Program, which supports arts organizations through strategic improvements to their technology infrastructure. So thanks to that key support from Bloomberg Philanthropies, we are currently implementing a digital preservation infrastructure for the museum that will ensure the integrity and availability of our digital archives into the future. So don't worry, in 20 years, if you want to view the recording of this program, it should still exist and be in a format that can be opened. That's the goal.
I know, I've of course used digital, the internet and digital images all the time to do searches, and it's amazing what you can find out there that's been digitized or scanned. So
I think we're ready to move into Q&A if anyone has any questions. I think Tony's got the mic back there.
Right, just raise your hand and I'll come around to you.
Sorry. For Geri, what was your relationship with throwing things away, especially early on? As you were processing.
I didn't throw anything away.
So nothing was thrown away. Duplicate, you were just hoarding it all?
Well, no, I didn't throw anything away.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, guys, for talking about this. In my limited exploration in the archives, the thing that I was really struck by and that brought me closer to the kind of personality and approach of both Dominique and John were letters between them and artists, correspondence back and forth. And I thought they were so beautiful. I thought there was a mixture of them being open-minded and French, and also maybe the business thing all together made the most beautiful, simple but beautiful letters. I wonder if you guys have any response to that archive of that part of them.
Well, most of the letters were in French. And I could kind of figure out what they were talking about, but I'm not fluent, and but I tell you that William Middleton did translate a lot of those letters, so eventually they'll be part of the archive because he's promised to send all of his documentation to the archives. But they were together so much of the time. So when they were apart, the letters were voluminous. They covered everything.
And I think collecting to them was very much about knowing the artist, and it's part of why so much in the Menils, like the Magritte works, are all later works because they were dealing with. They weren't doing things kind of historically, really. They were buying art that was new, and they were interacting with the artist as they made it. A lot, especially with Max Ernst and Magritte.
And they were they had very loyal dealers who they worked with to acquire not just contemporary art, but antiquities. And the icons, Bertrand Davisac was very instrumental in acquiring collections of icons and Byzantine material, like the keys and all the metalwork from the Byzantine Empire.
And that whole group of artists, Rauschenberg and Jasper John, not so much Cy Twombly, but were people that came and visited them in their New York townhouse, and so it was a very personal thing.
Did you know that in 1985, 15 years before this, 40 years ago, that the tools you were using, at the time we didn't understand it, we were using the rudimentary AI stuff. The hardware came from Stanford, the AI group, and that weird editor, Emacs, which was the editor that you used to type that tech stuff, came out of the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab.
Are you asking me? No.
I didn't know. I didn't know it either. So that's a throwdown statement. Margaret, what about AI? Of course. What about it?
That's a good question. I think that museums are trying to figure that out, and how, if there are ways it can be used responsibly, or if it's just Pandora's box. I don't have a good answer.
Hi, this question is for all three of you. Is there, what would you say is sort of the undone project that you would love to see done with material in the Menil Archives? If there's any that you've thought of, like someone should do this, or I would do this, or...
Well, I know when we were planning this, and I was talking about, we should talk about the future of the archives. And Geri just had very specific things that she was not able to get to during her time here that she wanted to get done. I'm trying to remember which collections.
The family collection, for one, and there was a wonderful collection that was organized or disorganized by Carl Killian for the Brazos projects. And I don't remember if it's 1 or 2 boxes of material, but it needs to be organized, and I never got to do that. But I don't really, when I thought I was going to die in the basement. I never thought I was going to retire until my daughter found a Houston Heights cottage in Nashville, Tennessee, of all places, where she was living, and convinced me to retire. And I bought the house unseen and moved to Nashville. And I remember thinking about not working, and all of a sudden I felt so wonderful. I loved it. I started gardening, and I read every day and knitted every night, and I didn't have to talk to anybody. It was great, because basically I'm an introverted hermit. So I found my niche there, and I've never regretted it. And I really don't have a feeling about the future of the archive, because I'm not a digital archivist. I'm a paper person. So I always wanted to hire a digital archivist, but it didn't happen while I was here. So it's happening now, which is great.
I think another way to answer that question maybe is that the archive, what archives do is hold the secrets, and the researchers have to find them. I mean, there was just a really good example with the Rauschenberg show, where there were all these letters from a friend of Bob Rauschenberg's named Arthur Frakes. And it was just recently discovered that there was all this information about the fabric works, which became part of the catalog. And so, I mean, we don't know. I mean, Geri's seen everything, but you know, you don't know what's going to become important at some point.
I was curious about institutional knowledge, because the two of you, Geri and Don, have so much. Is there anything being done to record your stories about the Menil, or your experience knowing Dominique for so many years and being here way before the museum opened? So I was just curious if there's anything going on with oral history or something like that that the Menil is doing, because everyone gets older.
I'll say that
Not me.
we do have an oral history program, and I sort of count this as an oral history tonight, but yes, we are trying to record those
I have a
stories.
lot of funny stories that I would do in an oral history that I won't tell you here now.
We'll make an appointment for that.
But Dominique de Menil was also, by the way, no one who worked with her ever called her Dominique, and never called her Dominique twice, let's put it that way. She was Mrs. de Menil.
Or Mrs. D.
Or Mrs. D, you could call her Mrs. D. But I'll tell you one funny story. She was hilarious. We had a painter who painted the Rice Museum for every exhibition, and I think he lived in North Carolina. He would drive up in his pickup truck, George Vanoy, he would drive up in his pickup truck and paint the entire Rice Museum, every exhibition. And they would go back home and come back. And one time he came back, and I happened to be right there watching this. He's standing there painting and crying. And Mrs. Menil came over to him and, George, what's wrong? And he said, my wife left me for a younger man. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. And then she was conciliatory towards him after she said that, but that was her initial reaction. But there were a lot of things. I remember, what was his name? Tom Sims was painting, and he turned around and said, Mrs. de Menil, I think, she said, don't think, paint.
Say a little bit about L.D. Dreyer.
Oh, Mr. Dreyer. He was the head of the shop at the Rice Museum, and I always came to work at 7 o'clock. Before bureaucracy, you could kind of figure out what worked best for you, and it was acceptable. So I would go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he would come. Bear was already there. Geri Parham was already at the shop. And then Mr. Dreyer would come, and he organized everything and everyone. And he would, he would say, what did he say? It ain't no piano. That was his commentary on anything you asked him. It ain't no piano. He was a great guy. What did you want me to talk about him? Is that what
All the style of the original Rice Museum, all the fixturing and all the stuff he had to build the night before it was used.
Oh, yeah.
That was his style. It was just real simple and real fundamental and real.
There would be people walking out as people were walking in. They're just finishing putting the exhibitions together at Rice. That's how it was done.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I will just, let's thank Geri and Don for being here tonight.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank Margaret McKee, Lisa Barkley, and Krista Hollis for helping us put this all together.
And I want to thank all the Menil people who are in the audience.
And thank you all for coming, and have a great night.